Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of Glass Science. This is Matt J with you. Going to be making a tube to launch some bottle rockets out of. I went ahead and popped a little hole, and now I'm just seeing where that fuse is going to sit. Now I want to be careful with putting too much heat into the tube here. As I remove one side of the wall, it's going to lower the stability of the rest of the tube. So as you can see here, it does begin to bend, but I can just line it back up into place pretty quick. Now the idea for this video comes from my childhood, actually. My brother and I would cut PVC pipes in half, cap one end, and then we'd use it as a little bottle rocket launcher to have a war. And it was pretty fun. Now real quick, I made this observation that I just wanted to share with you guys. I noticed that the water droplets here, it's basically condensed water from the heat which radiates down the tube as I heat up one spot. Now the interesting thing I've noticed is that the water droplets are also in a gradient of size. They get much larger towards the hotter end of the tube and then quickly begin to scale back to that smaller size at a much quicker rate as it reaches the working area where the heat was applied. And I just thought that was a cool little natural patternistic observation there. I do a lot of my research observing with nature, or different scales of it especially. But back to the demo, I'm going to go ahead and open up a little hole to help me cut off a piece of this tube. I'm going to use it as a slide to protect my hand from the fuse, the sparks that come off of it. I'm just pulling off little pieces of glass from the same area of the tube, and as I heat it back up, the surrounding area kind of evens out, so eventually it gets really thin and it'll pop a little hole. Now I went ahead and opened that hole a little bit more with my tweezers, and I'm going to go ahead and attach this punty to one side. And I'll just heat up the rest of the area and pull, and I'll just cut it right off. And then I'm going to go in with this brass reamer and kind of round out those edges to make sure it slides over the other tube nicely. And one quick announcement, I'm going to be starting a Patreon page. It's going to be a cool way for those that aren't local to me to get a hold of some of my glass, and also a nice way to kind of support what I do here, support the process. For those that don't know what Patreon is, it's basically a kind of a Kickstarter platform, but instead of focusing on one project, it kind of focuses on an ongoing process. So it's really great for the creative crowd and artists to just support what they do. And with that done, I'll go ahead and begin on the glass artillery tube. I thought it'd be kind of cool to see what happens when the firework gets dropped in there and explodes. It'll be a pretty simple tube. I'm going to just heat up the end and push out a disc as a flat bottom, and then tear off the top. And when it comes to fireworks, it's good to play it safe. You know, I've been through a few mishaps myself. I'd probably recommend eye protection would be one of the #1 things. And my little niece liked using the earmuffs because just the sound was a little bit too loud for her. You know, kids, they have a little bit more sensitive noise range, so that can be good for them. Now that I've gathered up a little glob of glass on the end, I'm going to smash it down into a circular base. Pretty easy little process. And then I'm going to grab these claw grabbers, warm them up a little bit because the metal is super conductive and it just rips the heat out of there. Then I'm going to go ahead and heat up a little band where the top of the tube's going to be, and then just melt it into 2 different pieces. Flash a little bit of heat into that base because that metal there is sucking the heat out. Then I'll pull a little bit. Then I'll pull at the same time as I blow, and that'll help stretch the tube out and make those walls super thin. And right here, you'll see I puff a little bit too quick, and a bunch of glass debris just ejects out. And that's why it's a great idea to have a nice ventilation system. If you haven't seen the smoke bomb test I did, check that out. And I might get more into building a ventilation system later. I did mine myself, kind of for cheap. And then the money I saved building it, I put into the fan, so it's extra powerful. I'm going to go ahead and start opening up this end here, make sure it's straight. You might notice right there, I'll flash a little bit of heat into the base just to keep it from cracking. That helps the outside from overcooling and basically radiates heat all the way back in and equals out the temperature. It doesn't take a lot of heat to melt the glass. It really just depends on how thick the glass is. If it's thin as a hair, it'll melt almost instantly. There'll be more of that later, but for now, let's head outside.
Let's light them up. Yeah. Oh, it went over there. Yeah. You see, I told you it wouldn't be stable. Let me explain that real quick. Maybe I can save some time. So basically, if we take off the stick, we destabilize it, because not only does the stick act as a counterweight to keep it balanced towards the bottom, the weight, but it also acts as a tail fin, because as the air travels over the stick, it basically drags on it and keeps it straight. And so that's why when I do it without the stick, it flies all which way. I like loading them without the stick though, because it's easier. This thing. I had it before right after. It almost did like a loop. Now we will use the homemade artillery tube to launch a shell. Go and drop it in, brother. Huzzah! I'm gonna find a safe spot back here. Run! For science!
This next shell will be loaded upside down to test the stability of the tube. I'm behind plexiglass also, and my brother has some extra protection you can't see. Don't try this.
Like popped out and just like fell. It was so much of a... Oh, look at that thing though, it's still going. That tube is awesome. Up more. Wow. Oh. Oh man, I was like right over the cars.